information operates. And what we're talking about here is the kind of security that the corporate guards provide. Human guards, the guys with the uniforms, walking around with security badges and nightsticks or whatever it is they carry. This is what we mean when we talk about physical security. That is part of your information security system, because after all, you're not only trying to secure yourself against hackers, you're trying to secure yourself against somebody who's going to walk in and physically take a hard drive out of your server and walk away with all your customer data that way. That's another way that can be done. So physical security is in place to protect against that. So we focus in this domain on risk-based analysis, on threats, on physical access controls. When we talk about risk-based analysis, if you'll remember in the first lecture that we had, we wrote out matrix of potential risks and then likelihood of that risk occurring, and then the impact that it would occur, total risk, etc. Well, exactly the same sort of risk assessment needs to be done for physical security risks, and that's what we're talking about at this point. And then we address threats. Threats to physical security include potential emergency situations, such as a fire or a flood, for instance, that can sometimes give other people access to your information assets that they wouldn't normally have. Service interruptions, natural disasters, sabotage, environmental controls, fire detection. When we talk about access controls, we talk about locks and human guards and surveillance monitors, all the sorts of things that you think of when you think about physical security. All right, so this domain then addresses risk-based analysis. It addresses various types of threats that have to work their way into your risk-based analysis, and then various types of access controls, which will be in many cases, the solutions to the threats that appear in your risk-based analysis. All right, now that we've taken a look at some of the content and concerns in domain number 9, let's turn our attention to the manager audit questions for domain number 9. The first one is, do our physical security guards understand their responsibilities relative to protecting against the theft and damage of our information assets? Are these responsibilities written down somewhere and they've read them and they understand them? And how are the guards tested on their adherence to these responsibilities? So all of that is part of question number 1. Question number 2 here. Do we have a written risk analysis for physical security threats and risks? Again, the same risk analysis chart that we did back in domain 1 to identify risks associated with our information assets. We need to ensure that as a part of either that analysis or as a separate analysis, we have built that same chart for the physical security threats and risks. And then number 3, do we have adequate physical access controls? And these would be things like locks and human guards, surveillance monitors, intrusion detection systems of some sort, not software, hardware, and then alarms, and so on and so forth. So the question is, what do our physical access controls look like? Question number 4, are we adequately protecting against disgruntled or disloyal employees from physically disconnecting and stealing server hard drives or otherwise corrupting, damaging, pilfering, stealing our information assets? Now here's a little footnote that's very important for you to remember. Most serious, significant information security losses are propagated by employees. We spend a lot of time trying to protect our company as we move through these domains from intruders. But you have to remember that most of the serious information security events that a company has to deal with are propagated by disgruntled or disloyal employees internally. Okay, so now let's take a look at an executive overview of our last domain, business continuity and disaster recovery. This 10th domain deals with BCP and DRP, as they are known. Business continuity is the process of making the plans that will ensure the critical business functions can withstand a variety of emergencies. BCP steps include scope and plan initiation, business impact assessment, business continuity plan development, plan approval and implementation, and the elements are keeping the business up and running until normal operations are restored, manual procedures, alternative solutions, DRP, disaster recovery planning, aids the corporations in making critical decisions and guiding action in the event of a disaster. It involves the making preparations for a disaster, but also address the procedures that have to be followed during and after a loss. DRP elements include procedures, hot site, cold site arrangements, staff responses, and that basically then is what this 10th domain is all about. Now that we've taken a look at some of the contents and concerns in domain number 10, let's take a look at two more questions. These are the last two questions in the manager's audit relative to in this 10th domain. So the first is, do we have a written business continuity plan that includes at least listing of various types of emergencies that this plan covers? That's the scope question. And then how the plan gets initiated. Under what circumstances will we initiate our business continuity plan? And then have we done a risk analysis chart again, just like we did in domain 1, for business impact assessment. In other words, when this particular information resource goes down, what is the potential impact on our business as a whole and the different pieces of that business? And then what is our policy and our procedures for modifying and enhancing this business continuity plan? Who is responsible for plan approval and implementation? And then specific procedures for keeping the business up and running during emergencies. And then what are the manual procedures and alternative solutions relative to business continuity? And then our second question in this domain, of course, has to do with disaster recovery. And that has 4 pieces to it. Do we have a written disaster recovery plan that includes at least procedures and assigned roles and responsibilities in the event of a disaster? Does that DRP include hot site and cold site arrangements, which, of course, in this case, we're also addressing all the issues relative to backup and archiving policies and procedures? How is our disaster recovery plan tested? And are there ever surprise tests during off hours? If you're not having surprise tests during off hours, in other words, unannounced outages at 2 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday morning, if that doesn't happen occasionally just to see how your company responds, then you haven't really got a working disaster recovery plan, and you're going to have a hard time convincing the courts that you had one. And then the last one, what is the process for analyzing past lessons learned and incorporating them into an improved disaster recovery plan? So that ends